Well, thank you very much. I was just saying to Peter at the front, being slightly cheeky, that that's my presentation done. Peter's covered after everything I was going to say. So I can stand down now. No, I won't. I'm going to cover off a number of the same themes, believe it or not, because they're common themes, they're common challenges, aren't they? So I think through today you'll see broadly the same topics looked at from different perspectives, different angles. So what I hope to do is share my personal thoughts. Yes, it is a track-based theme. Phil Doughty, who's sitting down there next to me, is the Chief Electrification over a line and power. What's your title, Phil? Mechanical electrical, but he basically does electronics. So he'll actually talk to you about some of the opportunities there, and I think as we progress this conference, it will be, as Liam said, more about the multidisciplinary engineering. But this theme for me today is track engineering. I can't see a pointer in this, so I'm going to end up pointing at the screens as virtually as such. So these are the themes I want to touch on with you. So yes, carbon, safety and performance go hand in hand, and affordability and delivery. And Brian, you're going to talk about unit rate challenges, and I'm going to do my very best not to step on your toes, but hopefully set you up for a good chat. So, first theme, carbon. One slide there. Here's a slide I stole from a colleague in the audience, Darren. Thank you very much, Darren. I think you prepared this one. But I think just a few factoids for you, if I may. So the definition for greenhouse gas protocol, it actually talks about three scopes, three ways of actually measuring kind of the emissions of carbon. Scope 1, which is the direct emissions from sources owned by Network Rail, so when we burn our own fuel in vehicles and so on. Scope 2, the indirect emissions from electricity, which we heat, power distribution, that stuff that we buy. And then the other indirect, which is effectively forging rails, transporting materials, all that sort of stuff which Peter mentioned. So, first fun factoid. Scope 3 is round about 8 billion tonnes of equivalent carbon. That's pretty big, pretty big. That's 97% of Network Rail's total footprint. It's huge. And track infrastructure accounts for a quarter of it. So track is a huge opportunity and a huge target. So some of the things that Peter mentioned about how do we actually be more carbon efficient, a lot of it is going to be about do we need to really renew and replace certain assets? What can we do to use our assets more cost effectively? But when we do, how do we actually be carbon friendly in those activities that we do? And I think that's going to be a huge challenge for us. So talk about safety. Normally when I do a safety slide, I put up the PIM, the precursor indicator model, but I thought I'd just show you something slightly different, which is the high potential incidents. So this is where if I had the pointer, I'll be pointing at the screen, I'll come over here, you won't be able to hear me. But in 2021-22, we had an awful lot of high potential incidents, and that actually pushed our rolling average up. So we've had a lot of bad accidents and high potential accidents. Fortunately, through 22-23, those have been coming down. So the picture I want to paint to you, as I go through the slides, is we have a huge amount of challenges, but in terms of safety, it sometimes doesn't feel like it, but we're actually doing okay. I won't say well, okay. We can get better, we need to get better. Now, I did say performance goes hand in hand with safety. So again, context. We actually hear a lot of challenging, we get very upset about our performance. It's context. Service affecting failures, way back since 2000, have been dropping for the track asset, which is really good. And there's a few things in here, so you can see off on the left-hand side, when we had Hatfield, there was a lot of re-railing that went on, and you can see a lot of re-railing themes through the history there, which is Sperry-based UTU equipment introduced, and various other initiatives. Back here, when we actually were running a lot fewer trains, COVID, we had the best service affecting failure performance that we have. So I think the moral we can all draw from that is we need more pandemics. No, we don't. No, we don't. Fewer trains, fewer service affecting failures. There is another graph which I won't show you, but actually it has demonstrated that the performance impact of any service affecting failure has been going up pretty much equally as well through a congested network. We're a victim of our own success. We're running more and more trains. So what's that say? Let's look at the good. We're getting better on the service affecting failures, but performance is a challenge. So more themes on safety. Again, context. Away from the track asset, but the wider engineering. Northwich, actually, where I grew up, near there, that's the station gable end of the roof, fell off. So you can just see down here on the left-hand side, there was a couple of passengers. They literally saw the roof coming down towards them and were able to step out of the way, and they weren't injured. But we could have killed people on the station. And that was all about an elderly asset perhaps not being maintained at its optimum level, and with the faults being live in the places. Actually, there was a tree growing out of the gable end, and people kept going back, cutting the stump of the tree down, and eventually it all just fell over. Goddington. We had a colleague of ours injured horribly, bad burns. We were fined, I think reasonably so, £700,000 after our colleague was badly burnt. Why did that happen? Because in that substation, the roof was leaking. So how many of you at home will actually have a leaking roof above your fuse box? Hands up. Clearly, none of you. But we've got, how many, Phil? Is it on Southern, I think there's around about 21 substations at the moment, which is leak. 18. 18. But it's all right. Safety's getting better, everybody. That's good. Thank you, Phil. So that's a problem for us. Tree risk. Again, not a track asset thing. But look, since 1990-2000, we've had a massive increase in tree risk. This is trees falling out in front of our trains. It's not all about on Network Rail infrastructure. These are neighbouring line-side trees as well. But again, I want you to be cited on that for context. We have got lots of challenges across our asset portfolio. So in terms of asset stewardship, fairly complicated graphs. But here we got on the left-hand graph, where we have around about the 1960s, a lot of work, a lot of investment went on into the track infrastructure. We were replacing jointed track, putting CWR in, getting rid of all timber sleepers. That then dipped down in the 90s to 2000s on the run-up to privatisation. But then after Hatfield, it then jumped up all over again. So we actually have a lot of renewals for around about 15 years. But then into the modern era, those renewals level dropped. And I expect them to stay round about the same, possibly slightly lower, which sounds a bit glum, doesn't it? But we'll come on to that. So what does that do to the used life of our assets? So here we go. From 2015 onwards, we're going to see a pretty, well, we have seen and we will continue to see projected an increase in our used asset age. So that is not all bad news, but again, contextual. There's a lot of research that's been gone on. We're doing a lot of predict and prevent to stop assets failing, but it is a concern. I think the other thing just to point out here, again, I wish I had a pointer, the yellow dotted line is S&C. In terms of policy, in terms of targeting, we're focusing very much on maintaining the S&C asset life, because generally that's where the safety and that's where the performance issues happen. So we absolutely need to be focusing on S&C to maintain those adequate levels of safety. In terms of another angle looking at safety, buckles. Peter, this is where Peter looked at my slides. Well, I know he didn't because I only sent them in on, was it yesterday, Liam? So the weather buckles, how did we actually do in this summer period? So this is a fairly simple way of looking at relative goodness of and performance of safety. So anything below the line on the left-hand side tends to indicate we are on the right side of the average over a degree of history, and number of buckles and so on. So bear in mind, the highest reported temperature was 37.3. I did actually have a report of 41, but that was an uncalibrated instrument down somewhere on Southern. But we know its air temperature was pretty high. Recorded Network Rail air temperatures was 37. But we had a huge amount of challenges, but this was 3 degrees higher than any other time that we've actually had recorded in, well, ever, quite frankly. and we did all right for the number of buckles. It's not good, but we did all right considering. Safety, tick. Performance, atrocious, because as part of the mitigations, a huge amount of speed restrictions were imposed, probably too many. We need to get better about that. In fact, certainly too many. So, safety good, performance terrible. But where do those buckles tend to happen? They tended to happen on the elderly assets. New, modern assets perform better. That's a no-shit Sherlock moment, isn't it? It's the elderly legacy assets, timber S&C, jointed track, 1960s era CWR, which is getting tatty. Those are the problem locations for us. I think because of time I'll skip past this, but I just want you to be sighted on the middle text. We predict, the world predicts, in UK, by 2050, the peak summer air temperatures will be in the round 45, 44 degrees. So we can expect more summers like the one that we just had. That is a precursor that we're going to be expecting in the future. So talking about affordability, I'm going to keep a close eye on Brian. If he winces, I'm going to sort of skirt over stuff. So, bit of fun facts for you. COVID was appalling for us. We went right down in terms of passenger numbers. But the good news, if you look at the red line on the left-hand side, we're around about 86% passenger numbers. That's good. It's good and it's bad, but let's take the good. In terms of index cost of travel compared to road, diesel and petrol costs, rail fares, again the red line, is extremely affordable. So that's a good message that our friends at RDG are pushing, and I'd like you to go away and talk to all your friends and colleagues. Rail is extremely affordable when compared to other modes of transport. What's the changes to travel behaviour? Are we going to get back to normal? Is it going to be 100% of pre-COVID levels? I don't have a crystal ball. I honestly don't think so. If you look at the blue bars on the left-hand side, where people have been surveyed, this is by RDG, the Rail Delivery Group, people have reduced frequency of return to travelling. But if you look, what are the reasons for the reduced current travel? Well, because they can do flexible working now. People can stay at home. They can work over Teams, the revolution of IT. Are they going to be coming back into the office? Well, round about half of them don't expect to. They don't expect to increase frequencies. So although I don't honestly know, I don't think we're going to get much higher than 86, 85% of passenger recovery, certainly in the short term. Also, in terms of revenue, here's a bit of a fun fact for you. The middle bars on the left-hand side, those are leisure travel. We've had a real resurgence in people using the railways for leisure. That's great. But the blue and the red out on the right and the left at the bottom, those are commuting and business travel. That's down. So what that tells us, the premium fares are not coming back to the railway. Revenue is going to continue to be challenged. So what does that mean? This is where I'm trying to hopefully not get Brian wincing. So I've covered off the top two graphs in different forms, the top three graphs, in fact, in terms of asset age. The stuff on the left-hand side, bottom left, having just looked at some emails this morning, the SOFA, the Statement of Funds Available, came out the last couple of days. So there's 44 billion which Network Rail will be able to spend on infrastructure. That's pretty good. Pretty much comparable in terms of in real terms. But that doesn't necessarily allow for inflation, fuel challenges, material costs, and so on moving forward. So what that means in terms of renewals, from round 5 submissions, the blue bar towards the middle, I expect when we do round 6, the value will stay at the same, maybe slightly lower, but that actually, around about 5 billion, maybe 4.5 billion, but that will be lower volume of activity. So not trying to steal Brian's thunder, unit rates, we see a huge level of variability. Peter's challenge, how can we actually be more efficient, more affordable? We actually absolutely have to be, and that's not to say those of you who are deeply involved in track renewals on the day-to-day, because you shouldn't be offended by this. You do a huge amount of brilliant work, huge amount of innovation. I can see Nick Matthews over there, who does an awful lot of work in this area. You come up with some brilliant ideas to reduce the unit rates. We need to do more in that area. we need to do more thinking about, are there any paradigm shifts out there? Can we use different plant, different equipment, different processes? Do we have a different access regime? The passenger pattern has changed. So let's challenge our current paradigm and see what we can do to be more efficient. That's the unit rates for S&C. Massive variability. Again, I know there's lots of structural factors, so I'm not going to preach at you about that. Brian's going to talk about that, I suspect, about our opportunities there. So my views and what that affordability means. Yes, it's a list. Always give them a picture, or as Peter does, don't give them anything and talk very eloquently. So I've got too many slides, Peter. But again, my personal views, we're going to see lower renewals activity, lower renewals volumes. Our colleagues in the routes and regions will have to target their money effectively to the safety, performance, critical interventions. That is not necessarily track related, that's the whole asset portfolio. So I expect to see more for electrical control rooms, electrical side. I expect to see more for structures. I expect to see more for vegetation, and indeed conversations at large at the moment maybe need more on drainage too. Asset life plans will be below our steady state, and that will continue for a period of time, at least into, I think, CP8. We will see increased levels of renewals being deferred. There will be an increased level of burden on our maintenance colleagues to keep things ticking over. Yes, let's face facts, there will be a greater performance and safety risk. Let's say it as it is. Greater challenges to manage is not impossible. We should stay within that sweet spot of risk appetite, but we have to be mindful that there's an increased risk. I do think there's a potential for more speed restrictions. Not an absolute, we will see more. We just need to understand what we can do to avoid those being applied. And we will have to ramp up spend in the track asset in future control periods. And then finally, maybe slightly provocatively, but again, it's a challenge. Given all of those challenges for the parochial track asset, the improvements supporting weather resilience and decarbonisation will absolutely be more challenging. It will. It's not impossible. We have to be very careful about our strategic decisions to do these things properly. So, how am I doing for time? 7 minutes I make it, something like that. So, wave at me if I'm going to overrun, but 7 minutes I'm going to spend here. So, in terms of the opportunities, this is where I come and be a little bit parochial. So, I am from the TA. So, help is here. It's not like somebody coming on a white horse charging over a hill and saying, fantastic, we'll save the day. But I think it's important that you all are cited that we are a team here. The routes, the regions, capital delivery, works delivery, TA, all the supply chain, we are one team. We need to be focusing on that. So talking about the TA, however, I want to be clear to you, because a lot of people forget about some of the central functions. We have a vision. World-class engineering team, trusted, respected and valued. That's all very nice, isn't it? Purpose. Delivery of innovative and efficient engineering supporting safe, sustainable and efficient railways, passengers and freight. Yes, I know that feels a little bit turgid, but again, it's important to have a clear statement out there so people understand what that is. So, TA is here. What actually is the TA's purpose? We've actually had, or roles and responsibilities rather, we've had lots of reorganisations recently, and it's hard, and sometimes we actually go a bit of silos. Again, an opportunity like today is to raise our heads and look around where that help might be coming from. So the TA is absolutely here to provide everybody across the whole of the railway family that specialist advice. We have frameworks, we've developed frameworks for skills and routes to competency. Actually something I did when I was president of the PWI, focused on routes to competency for the track community as well as just Network Rail. Very careful focus on advancements of technology, what's going to give us the best bang for our buck. Yes, the frameworks for standards and competence, challenge the standards. Who's heard that? Hands up. Nobody? Oh, come on. So, absolutely, if you think things could be done better, I rely on you to actually make those suggestions. And we are a critical friend, so we've actually got a double hat, not just providing the standards, but to actually challenge and support. And then the facilitation of technical growth and lateral learning, which actually largely is what today is about, isn't it? So in terms of the TA's priorities, say it as it is, People, efficiency, sustainability. 3 big priorities. I'll let you just take in those words for a second. How are we doing for time? 5 minutes. Okay. So allow me to be slightly parochial, talk about track, because yes, I'm the chief track engineer. I thought it'd be worthwhile making sure you're all aware there is something called a track policy. Hands up who's actually seen and read the track policy in the last ever. Ooh, more of you than I suspected. Phil saying what policy? Oh, he's only electrification. So this is something I shared a number of occasions, actually. I think one of the last times was with some ORR colleagues. So yes, we're on the left-hand side, we've got a framework, standards. We've got a policy, single policy and a page, because I think the last version was about 100 million pages and very turgid, so I wanted to have a very clear policy with very clear bite-sized statements about what we're trying to achieve. That feeds various regional strategies, and then we've got the supporting documents. From your perspective, construction standards are king or queen. And the missing piece of the puzzle is something I've put in place in the last 18 months with support from my team, is a technical strategy. And what's that technical strategy? Effectively, it's taking each of the policy statements and exploding them into how are we going to actually achieve those policy areas through some technology development. So post-match, Liam, if we can get that shared, I'll pass it out to you. We can share it shared to everybody. So, 3 minutes, doing well, I'm impressed. So what are my clear requests for you? So we can only do this or face these challenges, huge challenges, through teamwork. I need you to keep innovating, keep challenging, keep thinking about it. What's our objectives? Clear view on the objectives and work our way towards that. At times, we can get grumpy with each other. That's okay. None of this is personal. What we have to do is make sure as a team we actually are successful in our performance, safety and cost objectives. So we have to continue to share our knowledge, our best practice. Although I haven't brought it out in the theme of the presentation, one of the huge challenges we've got is sharing and passing good data around, because you can only make good business decisions when you've got good data, good information. So help us with that. And that is all very much you will do. Please help us. So in terms of coming to the party, through our last reorganisation, it was actually modernising management, which again, I'm sure most of you are still enjoying the throes of that. I've introduced a new works engineering expert role in my team. I'm actually still in the recruitment phase, but the whole point of that role from my team is to be the outward face to help, support, facilitate, and catalyse and crystallise those conversations, to be a conduit. So, that was my journey. It's all about the teamwork, I'll say again. Huge challenges that we've got. Effectively what Peter said with more slides. Thank you very much.